I'm Pat Donovan Potts, the Stormwater Manager with the City of Jacksonville, and joining me today is Mona Pedrick on the State of the River Address. Mona, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mona, can you do us a favor? And I know that you are president for the Onslow County Chamber of Commerce, but can you give us a little history about yourself? Are you from the area? How long?
I'm a lifelong resident of Onslow County.
Okay.
I was raised in Richlands, and so I have lived here for 60 plus years. We won't say exactly how many.
Less than 60. And you've raised a family here.
I have.
Do you work and play on the New River?
Absolutely, and have for most of my life at various times.
Well, can I take you back to your younger years? Give me a day in the life of Mona when she was in her younger years. What did you do on the river?
My daddy used to take me fishing. In some of the fishing holes up in the Richlands area. The river is not so deep up there, but there are some fishing holes in there, so we used to do that. And then it was not at all unusual in the summertime to go to the river and go to the bridge, the river bridge in Richlands, and just go under the bridge and play in the water. It was very shallow, but the bottom up there is white sand, and it's gorgeous. And so it was shallow, and at that time I couldn't swim, so it was easy to just play around in the water, and sometimes he'd take his dogs with us, and they would play in the water, and so that was a typical outing with the river.
What kind of fish, if you went fishing, do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember. They would be freshwater up in there, and I honestly don't remember eating them, simply because I just didn't eat a whole lot of fish when I was younger, but I don't remember. I want to say perch.
Okay.
But I don't really remember.
Okay. Well, fast forward a little bit then to the young adult years. How did you utilize the river then?
Well, when my husband and I got our first fishing boat, to begin with, we would take it down to the saltwater areas and down at the beach and the intercoastal waterway and so forth, and fish. And we would, you always got a bite whenever you were fishing down there. And so one day we decided that we would come up and put in and go out to Wilson Bay. And we did, and we kept moving and anchoring and fishing, and no bites, no anything. And we didn't see any other fishing boats out there, and we thought that really odd, because when we would be in the saltwater areas of the county, you would see various fishing boats, anchored around, and everybody would be fishing.
Okay.
But we didn't see anybody else anchored out there, and we wondered why. We were the only ones, but we didn't get any bites. And it wasn't until later that I got involved with Sturgeon City that I realized why we weren't getting any bites in Wilson Bay.
What year about? Early 80s, late 80s?
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s when this occurred? And you had not normally done any activities in the middle of the river, fishing, boating, like that. And so you were surprised by the lack of activity compared to downriver in the Sneeds Ferry area, inlet area.
Exactly.
Interesting. So we call those the dark years, when the city and the base were both discharging treated effluent into Wilson Bay. That changed our river as an ecosystem. But again, the council and mayor at the time decided to do something different, being that the New River starts and ends within our county. It's our responsibility to clean up. Thus the Wilson Bay Initiative and shutting down the old wastewater treatment plants. The city, as well as the base. The city went to land app. The base went to a very large tertiary treatment, and then a smaller land app. But so from that, which was about 95, 97, 98, things have changed. Do you yourself, utilizing the river, could you document any changes? Did you see any differences?
Oh, absolutely. About 11 years ago, we got rid of the motorboat and got kayaks, and we started kayaking on the river. And we have kayaked all the way from where it forms up near the Duplin County line, all the way down to below the bridges here.
Okay.
And so we kayak a lot up in the upper part of it that put in at a bridge there in Richlands and then come down to the Rhodestown access. That's my favorite kayak section in anywhere.
Really?
Absolutely. So the water, you see wildlife everywhere,
right.
and that's one of the things I love about kayaking, but it's particularly true here on the New River. And when you're up in that section, it is so different, so vastly different from what it becomes when it gets down here in terms of what you see in terms of wildlife or flowers on the riverbanks and those kinds of things. We enjoy it a great deal. It's easy access here to get into the river, and we don't have to always have someone to help us set up a shuttle to paddle the river.
Oh, okay. You said your favorite section for paddling the river was from the Rhodestown, from a bridge in Richlands to Rhodestown. Why that section?
Because that section is so different from the rest of the river. There are limestone rock formations that are through there, and it's so eerie whenever you're paddling through it, and you don't know what's going to be around the bend. And there's a lot of wildlife up there. There are a lot of deer. We've seen owl up there. We have seen all kinds of wildlife that you never know, which is another reason why I love to kayak, is because you never do know what's going to be around the bend, that because you're quiet and they can't hear you always, but deer, all kinds of things that we've seen. And the river does change. It is a white sandy bottom in most of that paddle. It's about a little over a 6-mile paddle.
Oh, wow.
And so it's very easy to do in an afternoon, and it's not real deep in most places. There's some holes up in there, but it's usually pretty shallow, and the kayak doesn't draw much water, so it doesn't take too much.
Right.
And you can paddle that whole way, and you just go from the different type of environment as you move on. Now, when you get past Rhodestown, you begin to get into some of the cypress trees and those kinds of things. But you can, going from one section of the river downstream to another, things change so much on this particular river, and it's amazing. We've paddled a lot of rivers, but a lot of them don't change that much from one paddle section to another.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting to know. Someone who is not an avid paddler, might want to do something like that and start with the New River because it's got so many differences and challenges. Okay. And you've been kayaking how long now?
About 11 years.
11 years. What kind of water life have you experienced? Any scary things in the water?
Well, we have had our share of paddling with a few alligators, and I use that term "with" loosely because they've always been very afraid of us, and we have respected their territory. The way we look at it is that with the wildlife that's on the river, we are in their backyard, and so we don't ever try to disturb anything. We do often stop and watch because you never know what you will see. I've seen a moccasin swimming across the river with a fish in its mouth, which was, and I didn't really realize they ate fish. I should have, I guess, since I've lived here all my life and knew that they lived in and around the river. But I'd never seen one with a fish in its mouth.
That's pretty sad.
It was, and I just stopped. I hung on to an old dead tree that was in the edge of the river there and watched him to see what he would do, and he took it up to the bank and turned himself around and just held it up until it quit moving.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize that he would do that. But then I thought, well, I guess if he was trying to unhinge his mouth enough to swallow it in the water, the fish would get away. So I thought that was ingenious.
Yes,
and,
smart snake.
Absolutely. But the alligators, we have seen some small ones, but we have seen some of the really, really large ones as well. And they're kind of cumbersome on the land. And the ones that we have encountered that way either stayed perfectly still, or we sort of encountered them as they were trying to get back into the water. And so we back paddled really quickly and gave them, enough room to do what they needed to do. It was a little scary as they go under, and then you're not really sure where they are. But we've never been bothered by them, but we always give them space.
You've never had one actually approach or come towards you or after you?
No.
That's one of the things that we would like to educate our citizens on, is sometimes feeding wildlife is not a good thing. It's actually harmful, especially in our American alligators. all wildlife are born with an instinctive fear of man. That is their protection from being harmed. And when a human starts feeding an alligator, that alligator is learning to trust a human or form, and they don't know the difference from one human versus another. And so if they're used to being fed and then they don't get fed, in other words, you go to throw out chicken or something, they're used to that arm movement and they snap at the chicken. Again, it's a good way to lose fingers, arms, and ultimately, if that happens, the alligator will have to be euthanized because it's lost its fear of man. So by feeding it, we actually are killing it. It's not a good thing to feed wildlife, so I appreciate you bringing that up.
And Pat, I really would also like to add that we don't chase them.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, we just stay, when we see them, we just stop or move back. Because we are in their space, and I know that with wild animals of any sort, if you try to get too close, they're going to be defensive.
Right.
And so we don't try to scare them and try to get closer to them. I think that we are extremely fortunate in Onslow County that we have this jewel of a river here that runs through us, and I think the fact that we do have, in the midst of this city, we have something that's as wild as an alligator, and that's a pretty special thing when you see one in the wild. By the way, I used to think I would sort of look along the banks as I would paddle, thinking, okay, I'm looking, along the dead logs and things like that to see if I saw one, and I'm thinking I'm pretty good, until one time we did encounter one, and we stopped and watched him, and he went to the bank and turned around so he could watch us, and went down to the bottom, and all that was up was his snout and his eyes, and I thought, Mona, girl, you would have never seen that alligator and identified it as an alligator. So they're out there, and they're not wanting to bother anybody, and they're very quiet.
Yes.
But we're fortunate, I think, to have that here.
Absolutely. And for those that haven't experienced, it's a little heart racing, but it's also memorable and very peaceful too. You're with nature.
Exactly.
So kudos for you for kayaking. That's the way I like to travel too. So how about in traveling up or down the river, would you ask citizens to get involved, to try something new? You never know what you're missing until you get out and with your adventuresome spirit and give it a try, or is this sport not for the weak of heart?
No, I think Elmer Eddy is one of my heroes, and Elmer, still paddling at 90-something, and I think that it's something that anybody can do, no matter your age. I mean, we paddle with young children,
right,
and as well as older adults, and so I think that it's a lifelong recreational activity, and I would absolutely encourage people to do it. You can paddle at your own pace, and I think that's what's so beautiful about having the river here.
Right.
Because if you kayak or paddle in a canoe, it doesn't matter. But we don't race. We just get out to get exercise and to see what we can see. And I mentioned earlier about what was around the bend, because you never know what you're going to come around and see. And a lot of that, the wildlife that you will see, or the flowers that you will see in bloom on the river. People who are traveling by car, just looking out the windows and crossing bridges, are never going to see those things.
Right.
And it's pretty special.
Are there clubs? Are there kayaking clubs or things that people can join and go as a group, or do you know?
Yes, there are kayaking clubs that paddle frequently in the area, not necessarily always the New River,
right,
but they paddle rivers in eastern North Carolina and, really, and across the state. And so if it's someone who is just a single, just a person who maybe their family members don't want to paddle, they could certainly do that, so they could go with the group.
Okay. What about, is there anything through the chamber or through tourism that you know of where someone might go to rent or buy a kayak? Could they call your office and someone would help guide them?
Absolutely. There are some places in the county that rent kayaks. And they can certainly call us because we do have the tourism contract as well for Onslow County at the Jacksonville-Onslow Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
But one of the things that we have done through tourism is to erect eco-friendly signs that are on the New River, so that as people paddle up and down the river, especially in the as they go upriver, they can look at the signs, and there are bits and pieces of information about the area, about the things that the people will see, whether it's wildlife or vegetation or whatever, and a little bit about paddling on or being on the river. And so that also helps to guide you, because sometimes when you're paddling rivers, it's just you put in at point A and you just go straight down to point B or whatever.
Right.
But we do have a number of creeks that come and feed into the river in our area. And so the signage, I think, helps with paddlers so that they don't get lost, or they realize, because they may think they're not in civilization anymore, but they really and truly are. And so seeing the signage, I think, does help paddlers to learn a little bit about the river and the area, but also to know kind of where they are on the river.
Do you ever worry about the water? Do you ever worry about water quality while you're paddling?
No, as a matter of fact, you always go to the county commissioners meetings when those water quality assessments are done, and that that information is good to know. But all you have to do is really look at the river. Because if I go back to my mid-'80s, where my husband and I were out there fishing and no bites whatsoever, that we didn't see wildlife. And now, not only has the life has returned to the river itself, but when you see the bird life that's around it, then you know that the river is alive and well.
Well, thank you. You should not worry about water quality. The only time we have spikes in our water quality data is immediately following a large storm event. Only then would I stay away, and that may be 24, 48 hours, depending on the amount of rain. And when I say large, 2 inches or more. And then again, it flows really fast. Fresh water will flow across the top because your salt water, brackish water is down below and a lot denser, so it just moves across. But any other things that you'd like for our listeners to know about the joy of paddling and or the New River?
I just say come and join me on the river, and let's see what lies around the bend.
All right, Mona, we'll see you on the river. Thank you very much.
Thank you.